Hey everyone, welcome. Dominic here with Smart Catholics, and today really excited to be joined by Father Michael Zimmerman. Father Mike, how are you?
Good, Dominic. How about yourself?
Doing good. Good to have you here. We're going to talk about your amazing work with Scivias in just a moment. Smart Catholics Mastermind, it's a live series to meet the minds and hearts of Catholic creators. They devote their time and talent to mastering their vocation so that you can live a fuller life faster. Father Michael Zimmerman was ordained to the priesthood in 2017 and currently serves as Assistant Vocation Director for the Archdiocese of Boston and Adjunct Scripture Professor at St. John's Seminary. So, Father Mike, we'll talk about Scivias in a moment. First, I want to meet you. Was there a moment in your life where you began to realize you couldn't stay who you were? You had to change, do something different. God was calling you. What was that story? What's that moment?
Yeah, I would say, I guess, a really big defining moment in my life was when I started to discover what it meant to be a priest and what being a priest really meant. And that really only happened after I was ordained. But it happened pretty quickly, when I was within my first month as a priest, things came pretty quick. I basically did everything that a priest can do in terms of his ministry right off the bat. And one episode in particular where I was called into a hospital and there was a man there, a young man, who wasn't baptized, was in danger of dying, but wanted to enter the faith. And so going to his hospital room, and his family was there. There was another patient at the bedside, nurse, some friends were there. Mm-hmm. And I was able to bring him the sacraments of baptism and then confirmation, his first communion, anointing of the sick. It was like a sacramental grand slam, basically.
All in one, yeah.
All in one. And just to see the God's grace at work in him and the peace that he felt in receiving that. And I think everyone else there perceived that and they wanted that for themselves. His roommate, who was a Catholic and had stopped practicing for 30 years and had began going to a Protestant church, and witnessing this, he said, I want to go to confession. I want to come back into the church. Wow. The nurse who was there, she was Catholic, but had never been confirmed. But then after that, she was like, I want to get confirmed. The patient's girlfriend who was there, she was like, I want to be baptized after that. So yeah, seriously, it was it was like heaven opened up, the clouds opened up, and God's grace just came pouring down, and everyone present there just got hit. They got nailed, and they wanted a piece of it.
Collateral salvation.
Yeah, totally. So experiencing that, or again in that first month, hearing confessions where somebody's like, I haven't been to confession in 50 years, 60 years. And I'm like, I haven't been alive that long. Yeah. But somehow in God's plan and his providence, he's brought the two of us together here. Mm-hmm. And so it's moments like that where, if that was the only thing I did in my whole life, the only thing I did as a priest, then it would all be worth it. Everything would be worth it. But those situations, those occurrences happen regularly in my life and in my ministry. So mm-hmm. I would say a big part of who I am is as a priest, and just getting front row seats to God's grace at work and being able to be an instrument of that has been really amazing.
I love the way you put that, front row seats to the infinite game. I mean, isn't that okay? So out of this, you then created this amazing product or video series called Scivias, Know the Ways of the Lord. And it's this unique video series. It serves as a vocational discernment guide for men considering the priesthood. And then you've given it all away for free on YouTube. I mean, so where did this come from, and how has it been received, and what's going on there?
Yeah, no, that's right. So it came from, I've been working in the vocations office for Boston for actually just over 2 years as of last week. But pretty much right away, I realized that a lot of people, they don't know how to discern God's will. There's books out there that talk about it. There's testimonies they can hear, but there's not so much a step-by-step guide how to leading somebody through that process of discernment. Mm-hmm. And, I've been able to do that with men kind of one-on-one, but recognizing, well, there's a lot of things we could talk about, and there's a lot of people out there more than I could possibly speak with. So recognizing I wanted to develop a resource to make that possible. And then when COVID hit and things were locked down for a little while, I had time to sit down, put pen to paper, and wrote the episodes in just over a week, 2 weeks, more or less. 27 episodes. They're only about 5 minutes in length, so really accessible. But in that, I share my vocation story, and to kind of make concrete the advice that I'm giving. I'm giving advice on how to discern. I show how it applied to my own life, and I try to show that visually throughout the series, taking place in the different locations where I was discerning as well. So making it like very incarnational and practical, but also very beautiful as well when how we tried to film it.
Gotcha. So this was something you sketched the idea and then you worked with other people to film it, or you did it yourself?
Yeah. So no, it's not just a selfie stick. We got a few other people to help film as well. A good friend of mine, Kelsey Cronin at Catholic TV. She put in extra hours after work, to help me film this. And another friend of mine, Dan Withrow, helped with the editing. And there was a few other people who did little bits of filming along the way, Gian Gonzalez and Marcelo Ferrari. But that's it. It's a pretty small, pretty much 2 or 3 of us for the most part. But I'm really happy with how it came out. I think it's really beautiful. And I've heard from a lot of people just how it's been helpful to them, those who are discerning the priesthood, but also those who either are married or already a priest, just to live that out more fully.
Yeah. No, I love this thing about I'm assuming you're millennial like me. We're in that age bracket, but we're like, we got a cool idea. Let's just do it, put it out there. It doesn't matter if there's, income, but it's a way to serve, or it's a way to just follow something that we believe in. So who's the kind of young man who really resonates with the message, the show, the series you've put together?
Yeah, no, great question. I think, most immediately it's very helpful for somebody who has had in the back of their mind, maybe God's calling me to be a priest, or I'm not even sure, or I don't even want to ask that question because I'm afraid of where it might lead. But I think this series will kind of show some steps forward. Maybe it's not as intimidating as contacting a vocation director, but to start watching this and to see, hey, this is this is actually speaking to me. I can relate to a lot of this, but also that it's like a joyful thing. It leads to peace, it leads to joy, doing God's will and seeking it out. It takes courage, but ultimately it leads to our own happiness as well. But I think it's for men discerning the priesthood, but also for anyone who desires to grow in a relationship with Christ, to have that freedom to say yes to whatever he wants. That's my real goal for anyone that I work with as a vocations director. It's not that they become a priest, but I want them to become a saint. And if that means becoming a priest, then that's what I want.
That's one path. Yeah.
Yeah. But I want them to become a saint who does God's will and is free to do so and has joy and peace in doing that.
No, that's beautiful. So now I got to ask, what was your vocation story? How did you end up discerning?
Yeah, sure. Well, you have to watch the episodes. No, I'm kidding. Really, for me, it began when I was in college, and I met a religious community called the Brotherhood of Hope that ran the campus ministry at Boston University, where I was a student, and seeing their witness that here's a community of men. They were normal guys, but their community life, their prayer, the work that they did, I was like, this is a good life. I could see myself doing this. I had a girlfriend of 3 years at that time, and I'm not good at lying. So I told her this is I could see myself doing that. And she was not too keen on that idea. Right. And seeing how upset she was, I ran away from it. And I was like, I'm just making all of this up. But then it came back the next year that, that thought oh, maybe I could be doing that. I should be doing that. So I began to meet with one of the brothers to pray regularly about this question. And I began to see, I felt the most peace and joy in times of prayer and service in the church. And ultimately that God was calling me to give myself to him in such a way that I couldn't give myself to a wife in the way she would deserve, and family. It's just being one person and not being able to give myself totally in both directions. So ultimately, it was a call to celibacy first, and then discerning the priesthood kind of came later in college. But yeah, when I was 20, I broke up with my girlfriend of over 4 years. It's 20% of your life. It's a hard decision of my life, but received a lot of consolation. Yeah, this is what God wanted for me.
Gotcha. I'm curious how you would, how do you define celibacy? Like, as you have come to discern that this is the call you need to follow, and it not being a negative thing. How have you articulated that?
Yeah, it's not just not marrying. That's a part of it. That's an essential part of it. But there is, the reason for that is like an exclusive relationship with the Lord. Like as you grow deeper in intimacy with somebody, it ultimately becomes more and more exclusive. So we see this in marriage, like you only marry one person, you don't marry others. And so that relationship is, the more intimate it becomes, the more exclusive it becomes. And I felt myself being called to, very intimate, exclusive relationship with God, that I had a hunger and a desire for love and for intimacy that I recognized that no other human being could give me. And that ultimately only God could. Now so I took that as a sure sign of my vocation. It was also the greatest temptation as well, because it's like, well, maybe this person can fulfill this desire that I have. They seem perfect, they seem like everything that I would ever imagine. But a lot of times when we first fall in love, become infatuated with somebody, that love is really based in an fantasy, like an illusion ideal that we have. And with time, as we grow in that relationship, we have to learn to love the real person that's in front of us. And so if somebody who's called to marriage, ultimately they're going to be called to marry that real person, not their ideal of what that person should be. But for me, that ideal person was God.
Right. And then they make you date him for like 7 years before you like take it seriously, right?
Yeah. Well, I try to take it seriously all along the way, but in seminary, so it's 6 years in seminary before I was ordained. And throughout that time, there were moments where it was like, all right, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this what God's calling me to do? But every time there was a moment of crisis and I was honest with myself and honest in prayer, I recognized that God was inviting me to go deeper with him.
Beautiful. Wow. So in starting to wrap up a little bit, even though I have a lot more questions for you, but
well, another time if you'd like.
Just do it again. With Scivias, you launched in April, I think it is, of this past year. What's been the coolest story that's come out of putting it out there so far?
The coolest story in terms of putting it out there. The thing about the internet is that a lot of it's anonymous. Like I have no idea who's watching this right now or who will watch this or how it will impact them. But there have been like tips of the iceberg, like little moments where somebody says like, in passing, like, oh, this has been really helpful for me. This has been really helpful. And this is what led to my decision to apply to seminary next year or things like that. And so how many people that is, I don't have the numbers or statistics, but I've heard it from enough. And I'm sure there's others that I don't hear it from that, encourage me. And it's just a sign of like God's grace at work. So I just kind of trust myself to that. It's like, okay, I feel called to do this, and I trust God to do with it what he wants.
Beautiful. All right. And wrapping up then, if you had 1 minute, Father Mike, to share a message to the world, what would you say?
Yeah, I would repeat the words of St. John Paul II of be not afraid, open wide the doors to Christ. As in my line of work, I've realized a lot of men are afraid of a vocation director. Like I walk into the room sometimes and people are like, I'm going to the other side of the room. But in reality,
you're the cool guy.
No. In reality, they're not afraid of me, but they're afraid of God. And they're afraid that God doesn't want what's best for them. He's going to take something away from them. He doesn't want them to be happy. And ultimately, my words would be not afraid. You know, that God is loving, he's merciful, he's good. What he asks of you might require sacrifice. It might require challenging, but that's because he desires your greatness and your salvation. And ultimately, it's going to lead to peace and joy in your life. And just running away from that, hiding from that, being in the darkness is not where you're going to find peace and joy. So open wide the doors to Christ, invite him in, give him permission to do what he wants.
Awesome. Father Mike, how can people get in touch with you or follow you, and how can they watch Scivias? Apart from me dropping it in the show notes, how can, let's say it out loud.
Yeah. So our Facebook page is Vocations Boston, and the same as our YouTube channel, Vocations Boston. Website is vocationsboston.org. So those would be the best ways. Vocations Boston, just search for us that way.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you again for jumping on with us today. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Crystal Huerta, who is regularly jumping on and watching these episodes, these live shows. So kudos to you, Crystal. So for those who are catching this replay, this was Smart Catholics Mastermind. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your one friend that you think would really like to watch it. And then come and regroup with us in the free Catholic community on smartcatholics.com. We are free of trolls and ads and toxicity, which really is incredible, faithful to the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and the Church, and we are committed to a culture of kindness and learning. Does that sound like you? Well, then come and join us. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Father Mike.
Thanks, Doug.